All right, get ready to dive into ancient China. You handed us a fascinating text this time, the Analects of Confucius, translated by Burton Watson.
Wise sayings.
Glimpses into history.
And a teacher who really knew how to make a point.
Yeah. It's like overhearing a 2,500-year-old conversation between Confucius and his students.
No long-winded theories here,
Sure.
just sharp insights
Yeah.
on how to live a good life and build a just society.
Okay, so before we get lost in these ancient conversations, who was this Confucius guy?
Yeah.
Was he like royalty or something?
Not quite. Confucius actually grew up in poverty
Oh.
in the feudal state of Lu, which is modern-day Shandong province. But he really valued learning and moral strengths over, like inherited power. And that gets to the core of his teachings.
I noticed that in the text. He seemed to be longing for the good old days of China.
Right, yeah. Confucius idealized the era of China's earliest rulers, figures like Xiao and Shun, who were seen as paragons of virtue and good governance. And he believed that their model of leadership, which was based on moral authority rather than brute force, was the key to restoring order and harmony to society.
And it's important to remember that Confucius wasn't just some philosopher sitting in an ivory tower. He was deeply involved in the politics of his day.
Absolutely. He was very disillusioned with the corruption, and moral decay he saw around him in the ruling class. His teachings were, in many ways, a direct response to the political turmoil of his era.
So he wanted to, transform society.
Yeah. Imagine a society where people are promoted based on their character, not connections. That was Confucius's dream.
We've got this ambitious, ethically driven teacher yearning for a more virtuous past. So what was his plan?
Well, this is where the idea of the gentleman, or Jinzi in Chinese, comes in.
Okay.
Confucius wasn't talking about just being a rich kid. He was describing an ideal of character, someone whose moral compass always points true north.
More than just a title. It's about really embodying a set of values.
Exactly. Think respectful, trustworthy, always striving to learn and better themselves. Would you want this person as your leader, friend, or teacher? That's the test of a true gentleman, according to Confucius.
Yes, such a powerful concept.
Yeah.
How does this gentleman idea fit into Confucius's vision of leadership?
Well, for Confucius, leadership wasn't about commanding and controlling. It was about inspiring and uplifting. He firmly believed in leading by example.
Okay.
He saw virtue, or day, as this magnetic force that draws others towards goodness.
So people are more likely to follow someone they admire and respect?
Yeah.
But he also uses this other term, lie,
Yeah.
often translated as ritual propriety, which I always found a bit confusing.
A lie.
Yeah,
It goes
no,
beyond
yeah.
etiquette. Think of it this way. For Confucius, rituals weren't empty formalities. They were a means of cultivating inner virtue and creating social harmony.
So bowing to your elders isn't just about being polite. It's about reinforcing a sense of respect
Yes.
and order within the family and society.
Exactly. Confucius believed that by meticulously practicing these rituals, by embodying those right actions, you could actually shape your character and contribute to a more ethical and harmonious society.
I see how that connects to his view of leadership. If a ruler embodies virtue and upholds ritual propriety, their people will follow their lead.
Exactly. It's about setting the tone, creating a culture where everyone understands their role and strives to live up to their highest potential. And this brings us to the mandate of heaven.
Right. The ruler's cosmic report card. So a leader's legitimacy wasn't just about their birthright or military might. It was about their moral fitness to rule.
That's right. Confucius believed that a ruler who loses the mandate of heaven through corruption or just not caring about the people risks forfeiting their right to rule.
Talk about treasure. It sounds like Confucius placed a lot of weight on the shoulders of leaders.
Absolutely. And this idea of the mandate of heaven had a huge impact on Chinese history. It shaped the dynamics of power for centuries, giving people a moral justification for rebellion against bad rulers.
Wow. And I got to say, reading through the Analects, I was surprised by how witty and engaging Confucius could be. It's not just dry philosophy. There are these little moments of personality that shine through.
Absolutely. One of the things that makes the Analects so great is that they're not just a bunch of rules. They're full of stories and humor that make Confucius feel like a real person.
Right. Like when he said, clever words and a pleasing countenance, a little humaneness there.
Exactly. It reminds us that true character is more than just appearances.
Not just about saying the right things, but living the right way. And his observations about human nature are spot on, like the one about people who sleep all day being like rotten wood.
Yeah, I love that one. He's saying if you're not actively engaged in bettering yourself, you're wasting your potential. It's a call to action.
I see it. And the stories about Confucius interacting with his students.
Oh, yeah, those are fantastic. There's this one where a student is bragging, and Confucius, in his classic way, just shuts him down. He says, twice is enough.
Oh, I remember that one. So good.
It's a classic teacher move, you know. It perfectly illustrates his point about humility. And these stories are what make the Analects so relatable. They're not just about rules, they're about people trying to figure out how to live a good life.
It's incredible to think that these teachings from over 2,500 years ago can still speak to us today. What about the bigger impact of Confucianism? Did it just stay within China?
Oh, not at all. Confucianism spread throughout East Asia, influencing Korea, Japan, Vietnam. It was huge.
Yeah, I read a little about that. And as it went to new places, it evolved and adapted to different cultures.
Exactly. It took on a life of its own.
Wow.
But in China, its impact was even bigger. It became the official state philosophy, used to train government officials for centuries. It provided this whole framework for ethical leadership, social harmony, and personal development.
And here's the wild part. It's still relevant today. These ideas about ethics, self-improvement, and social harmony are timeless.
It's pretty remarkable. A teacher from 2,500 years ago can still influence how we think about leadership and morality today.
Welcome back. Last time, we talked about who Confucius was and his concept of the gentleman.
And all those stories from the Analects.
Yeah, the ones that really bring his teachings to life.
Right.
Are you ready to go a little deeper into his ideas about leadership and government?
Oh, absolutely. We've only scratched the surface of what the Analects have to offer. It's amazing how these ancient texts are still so relevant to leadership today.
I know, right? My copy's already full of underlines and dog-eared pages. It's like Confucius is talking to us across the centuries. So what did he think made a good leader?
Well, he believed that true leadership wasn't about bossing people around.
Uh-huh.
It was about truly embodying virtue.
So you can't just say you're virtuous, you got to walk the walk.
Exactly. That's where D comes in. It's often translated as virtue, but it's more about the moral power a leader has. It's about inspiring people, not forcing them to do things.
But isn't virtue kind of subjective?
That's a good point. But Confucius believed that even though people might see virtue differently, there are some core principles, like righteousness and benevolence, that everyone should follow. And he thought it was important to study the classics, reflect, and constantly try to improve yourself to really understand it.
So like always learning.
Yeah. And he also talked a lot about lie or ritual propriety as a way to cultivate virtue.
We talked about lie before, like bowing to elders.
Right.
But it seems like it's way more than just being polite.
It is. For Confucius, rituals were a way to train yourself, to do the right things so that eventually they become a part of who you are.
So it's not just going through the motions.
No, it's about really thinking about your actions and making sure they match your values.
So I guess if a ruler is virtuous and practices lie, people will naturally want to follow them.
Exactly. Confucius believed that a truly virtuous leader doesn't need to threaten or punish people to keep things in order. Just being a good example is enough to inspire people to do the right thing.
That sounds almost too good to be true. Did Confucius really think it was possible?
Well, he was an idealist, but he was also realistic. He knew that perfect leaders were hard to find, but he still believed that even small improvements in a leader's character could make a big difference.
So it's about striving to be better, even if you never reach perfection.
Exactly. And it connects back to the mandate of heaven. If a ruler isn't virtuous, they can lose their right to rule.
That's a powerful reminder that leadership is a responsibility, not just a privilege. So how did Confucius think leaders should actually govern? I got the sense that he wasn't a fan of micromanaging or ruling with an iron fist.
You're right. Confucius didn't believe in being an authoritarian ruler. He thought leaders should trust their officials to do their jobs well.
Didn't he have some students who wanted to use military force to take over a territory?
Oh yeah, Ran Yu and Zilu. They served a powerful family and wanted to go to war. But Confucius was totally against it. He said their job was to give good advice, to try to find peaceful solutions.
So even though he believed in respecting authority, he also thought it was important to stand up for what's right.
Absolutely. And that brings us to Zemming, which means rectification of names.
Rectification of names. What's that got to do with leadership?
Well, Confucius believed that people's words and actions should match, that their title should reflect who they really are. If there's a disconnect, it creates chaos.
So if a ruler says they're kind but acts like a tyrant, that's a problem.
Exactly. It undermines their authority. And this applies to everyone, not just leaders. Fathers should act like fathers, sons like sons. If those roles get messed up, society falls apart.
That makes sense. So how do you enforce that? Did Confucius believe in lots of rules and punishments?
Surprisingly, no. He thought laws and punishments were a last resort. He wanted to focus on education and teaching people to be virtuous.
So instead of being afraid of getting punished, people should just want to do the right thing.
Yeah. He believed that if people are guided by virtue and a sense of shame, they'll naturally make good choices. And he thought education was the key to making that happen.
That's a beautiful idea. But it also seems kind of idealistic. Can you really create a society where everyone is morally perfect?
That's a great question, and it probably puzzled Confucius's own students. How do you turn these big ideas into real change?
Right. It seems almost utopian. Did Confucius ever talk about that gap between the ideal and the real world?
He did. He knew that achieving perfect harmony was incredibly difficult. But he still believed in those ideals and pushing people to be better. Even small steps towards virtue can make a difference.
So it's not about reaching some perfect endpoint. It's about the journey of trying to be better.
Right. And that's something we can all relate to. We may never create a perfect society, but we can definitely try to be more ethical and compassionate ourselves.
I wonder what Confucius would think about leadership today.
I bet he'd have a lot to say about social media and how polarized everything is.
He'd probably be shocked.
Yeah,
But I think his teachings are still relevant, like leading by example and having integrity.
definitely. But there's one more thing I want to talk about before we move on.
Okay, what is it?
It's Ren, which is often translated as benevolence or humaneness. But it's really about having deep compassion for others. It's the core of Confucius's ethics.
It sounds like something we need more of these days.
Totally. Next time, let's explore how this idea of Ren shows up in the Analects and what it could look like in our lives.
Okay, we're back and ready to tackle Ren. Going into this deep dive, I thought it was just about being nice,
Yeah.
but it seems like it's way more than that.
It is. Ren is often translated as benevolence or humaneness, but those words don't really capture the whole idea.
So how should we think about Ren? Can we even define it?
That's the thing. There isn't really one simple definition. But you can think of it like this. Ren is a deep well of compassion and empathy that affects everything a person does.
Okay.
It's what drives all the other virtues Confucius talked about.
So you can't just say you're a gentleman or follow all the rituals. You have to actually have that inner feeling of empathy, that Ren.
Right. Ren means recognizing that we're all connected, that we're all human no matter our background. And it makes us want to treat each other with respect and kindness and to be fair.
So it's like Ren is the fuel that powers all the other Confucian ideas.
I like that. It's not just a feeling. It pushes us to do what's right, to fight for justice, to help people. It pushes us to make the world a better place.
What I find interesting is that Confucius never actually defines Ren. He uses all these stories and metaphors, but he doesn't give a clear definition.
Yeah. He wanted his students to figure it out for themselves, to really wrestle with the idea.
So it's like he's encouraging them to learn actively, to really think about things and apply them to their lives.
Exactly. Confucius didn't believe in just memorizing stuff.
Mhm.
He wanted people to truly understand and internalize these ideas.
And all that wrestling with ideas and reflecting is part of self-cultivation, right?
Absolutely. For Confucius, cultivating Ren was a lifelong journey, not just something you learn overnight. It's about constantly trying to be more compassionate and understanding. And in the Analects, you see him pushing his students to look at their own motivations, to think about the consequences of their actions, to try their best to do what's right, even when it's hard.
There's this one passage that really stuck with me. The man of Ren is one who, wishing to establish himself, seeks also to establish others. Wishing to have himself enlarged, he seeks also to enlarge others. Wow, talk about setting a high standard.
That's a really important passage. It gets to the core of Ren. True compassion isn't about sacrificing yourself for others. It's about realizing that we're all connected, that when we help others, we're also helping ourselves.
So it's not about putting yourself last, but realizing that we all benefit when we help each other. That's a powerful idea.
It is, and it changes how we think about everything. Our relationships, leadership, how we treat people. We're not just individuals, we're all part of something bigger.
Okay, I get the concept, but it still seems pretty idealistic. How do we actually put Ren into practice? How do we make it real?
That's the big question, isn't it? How do we take these big ideas and turn them into actions? There's no easy answer. But Confucius does give some clues in the Analects, like respecting your parents and elders and treating everyone with courtesy, no matter who they are.
So we start small, with our everyday interactions, with how we treat everyone around us.
Right. All those little acts of kindness and respect are what build up Ren. And don't forget the golden rule. What you do not want others to do to you, do not do to others.
Simple but powerful.
Exactly. It can guide us in so many situations. And if we keep practicing these virtues, making the effort to be compassionate, we cultivate Ren within ourselves. And that's how we start to create that positive change in the world that Confucius talked about.
This has been an incredible journey. We started with these ancient Chinese texts and ended up talking about leadership, self-improvement, and compassion. It's given me a whole new perspective.
Yeah. It's amazing how relevant Confucius is today. His ideas give us a way to live better lives and build a more just world, one act of Ren at a time.
So, listener, as we wrap up our deep dive into the Analects, we challenge you. How will you embody Ren in your own life? What can you do today to show kindness and compassion? Remember, as Confucius said, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Take that step, and you might just inspire others to do the same.
Thanks for joining us.